How much headroom should I leave? Now, I had this discussion um, with a few other engineers quite a while ago now, and I wrote a small article about it because it was something that as mastering engineers we get a lot, and people always say to us that I've read that I need to leave -6 dB, I need to leave -3 dB. Some say I need to leave -1, some say -12. Look, the reality of it is that as long as you do not peak at 0 dB, right? As long as you're not peaking and clipping and you have a full dynamic range. So let's say, to put it into layman's terms, the audio isn't square. If you look at the waveform, once you've printed the audio, if it hasn't got any square points, then you're all good. Stay below 0 dB. You could be peaking at, let's say, minus 0.5 dB. And when we receive it, right, it's perfectly fine. Now, the reason it's perfectly fine is because we need right something around -6 dB going into our analog mastering chain, right? So we need about -6 dB. Now, if you sent me a song, for instance, at -6 dB, I'd stick it in, it would go directly into the mastering chain. I'd have my fader here, and I'd be able to just kind of go, right, does it need a little bit more into the master chain or a little bit less? Right, no, perfect, -6, perfect, goes in. Start mastering. If you sent a song at, let's say, -0.5, same again, put it there, and then we would adjust the volume going into our mastering chain. So we'd bring it down to -6 dB if we need it down to -6 dB. It doesn't matter as long as you are below 0 dB and not clipping and have a full dynamic range. We're all good. There's no, it's it really doesn't matter. Now, obviously, we're talking about digital summing, we're talking about literally in the box mixes, printing from the box, and that works as long as you're below 0 dB, you're perfectly fine. The whole -6 and all this sort of stuff is if you're kind of talking about headroom in the analog domain, yeah, it comes into play. It's an important factor. -6, -3, they're great levels to be at if you're summing for an analog console, things like that. But you might want to run hot and certain things. If you're using a Neve console, run it hot and get a good output. But generally speaking, once you're in the box or printing from the box, as long as your master isn't peaking and clipping at 0 dB, you're perfectly fine. And I get the question asked probably once a day of what level of headroom to leave, and I always say between -6, -3 is perfect. But a lot of people get hung up on well, which is it, -6, -3, and they get hung up on trying to make sure that it is precisely -6 or -3, and it really, like, don't worry about it. I have never ever received a song for mastering. Never in my life have I received a song for mastering that has a full dynamic range and is, let's say, it's at -0.1, right? And it's not clipping. I have never ever had to send a song back or ask for a revision, a revised mix of it at -6 dB. You just do not have to do it. We live in 2022 now. Like, you can clip gain, just whoop, down it comes. You know, it's so simple, and it doesn't need to be made out to be this like science that has to be followed. -6 dB. If you don't send it to me at -6 dB, I send it back. It's not true. It doesn't need to be like that, right? As long, look, you could be at -1. You could be, if you was at minus 24 dB, for instance, right? Ridiculously quiet in the terms of printing a mix, right? As long as you are not printing a mix from an analog summing console at minus 24 dB, because then when you turn that volume up, you're going to be, you're going to increase that surface noise ridiculous amounts. But generally speaking, digital, you're not talking, there's nothing in play. There's no surface noise, or you shouldn't be adding any anyways. That volume, whether it's minus 24 dB, is no different to if I was to turn that volume knob up on a volume on the output, or if I was to turn the volume up inside the actual file. It's it doesn't make a difference. And like I said before, so many people get hung up and worried about -6, -3, -12, -9. No, I haven't ever heard anyone say -9. It's either 12, 6 or 9, 12, 6 or 3. It doesn't matter. From our perspective as master engineers, it doesn't matter. It does not make a blind bit of difference, right? As long as you are working digitally, it doesn't make any difference. As long as you are minus dB on the output. So what I would always say, right, is to be on the safe side, to 100% check, is print your mix, load it back into a new session, then press play. Open the waveform up into a big size, look at it, and if you see any square points, then you know you're clipping. Then also just look at the output of the metering, look to see where you're peaking, and get a great looking mix, and it will be perfectly fine for mastering. So yeah, that's the answer to that question. How much headroom should we leave for mastering?